I certainly would not rule out Isak arriving at Anfield. They've got the funds. A lot of fans are asking how Liverpool can afford to spend all this money.
It's like signing an all-star team, isn't it? Have you ever known a transfer window like this? Could this be transformative?
This shows that they have spent from a position of strength.
If that happens, when you look at the attacking options at their disposal, it's very difficult to see anybody else wrestling the Premier League title from their grasp.
There is still work to do. Centre-back, they're super light. They still have work to do in that regard. But as a statement and as a message to potential signings, we are a serious club, look at where we're going to, it couldn't have been louder.
I think in an ideal world, they may have kept Luis Diaz, and I think they felt this was too good a deal to turn down, really.
Teams have cottoned on to what Liverpool were doing in the sense that everything was going through Salah. They're trying to add players who could create space for Salah, who can combine with Salah, but also create problems in their own way. I think this whole window has been about making the toolbox bigger.
Hello and welcome wherever you are. This is talkSPORT's Premier League All Access podcast in the middle of the dark season. I am away in the United States of America, Nashville, Tennessee. For me, Crookmeister is here as well. He'll be looking at some of the runners and riders in the Premier League with help from a guru of European football in Kev Hatchard. And we're going to talk about Liverpool today, and that's why we've got Kev, because Kev's a big Liverpool fan. Also, a lot of their signings have come from the Bundesliga as well. So after a sensational transfer window so far, we'll be delving in to their progress and what they've been doing over the course of the last couple of months and why they've been spending so big. That's coming up in just a second. Crookmeister, where are you?
Still in sunny Portugal, last day here. So, the Wi-Fi has been a little bit temperamental this morning. Hopefully it holds out all right.
Is it more or less temperamental than the inflatable dragon that you were riding the last time we were with you?
Arguably more. I've managed to tame the dragon. At least I can sit on it for a few splashes now before falling off.
Have you? I think it's probably best that we don't go into too much detail there. Kevin Hatchard, big summer for you. I know you haven't gone away yet, but you're on just about to jet off. But what a great weekend we've had of live sport. And in particular, the Lionesses yesterday. I was watching it in a bar in Nashville. Loads of my family were there. Actually, a load of the locals got involved as well. Some guy had just flown in, Nathan, got off a plane, tried to find somewhere to watch the game, found us, ended up hanging out with us for the whole of the afternoon. It was a brilliant experience. They weren't fantastic, especially in the first half, much better in the second. But they find a way to win, Kev.
Yeah, they do. And it's a phenomenal effort. I mean, you only have to start with Sarina Wiegman to have got to 5 tournament finals in a row is just unprecedented. And to have won 3 of them, to have won all 3 Euros finals she's got to. We talk a lot about winning culture. We talk a lot about how you put a squad in position to win tournaments. And that's exactly what she does time and time again. She made some big, bold calls. She had to adjust when she lost key players before the tournament. And those players have really grasped the nettle. And the way that they've come from behind in each and every knockout game is really quite tremendous. And they weren't the better team against Spain, but in the end, it's their name on the trophy again. And in tournament football, that's all that matters, really.
Well, Spain were behind in the whole tournament for 4 minutes, and England were ahead in the tournament for 4 minutes and 52 seconds. That sort of tells you everything that you need to know. I think that's in knockout games only, by the way, because obviously they were ahead for a lot longer in the Dutch game earlier on. But I was reading those statistics earlier on today, and I think that just sort of sets up what England are all about. Kelly was the hero once again. Blessing in disguise, maybe, that James got injured because it allowed Kelly to come into the game. Lawrence clearly wasn't 100% fit, so it meant that Kelly could come in earlier and have an influence on the game. I thought she was absolutely terrific. I think she's been terrific over the course of the tournament, and that's also credit to Sarina Wiegman, who told Chloe Kelly right at the beginning, you're not going to be one of the starters, but you are going to be expected to make a huge impact off the bench, and she's done that on every occasion that she's come on. And to put it into context, imagine scoring the winning goal in a European Championship final, and then 3 years later, scoring the winning penalty in a European Championship final for your country. Chloe Kelly can walk on water for the rest of her life. If you think about how long we've been talking about Jeff Hurst in the Cup final of 1966, how long we're going to be talking about Chloe Kelly? No one's ever, surely, going to replicate those achievements, Crook.
No, absolutely. And obviously it's been a bit of a traumatic journey this season, obviously with the way that her exit from her previous club played out. So she's obviously a very resilient character. I love the penalty technique. I mean, nothing I've ever seen before, but I'm sure kids all over the country will be trying to replicate that today. And it's the first time an England national football team has ever won a major trophy on foreign soil. So that is uncharted territory as well.
Yeah, and it was absolutely thrilling to watch. Do you know what? A lot of times I've been covering women's football over the course of the last 10, 12 years, and the interest has not been as big. And people say, well, what's going on there? Why are you doing this? Where, who's interested in that? Blah, blah, blah. There's no one watching it, etc., etc. Yesterday and the last week, I think, has proved that that's all not true anymore. I went to a bar, as I mentioned, in America. I said to my boys, I said, I'm going to watch the game on Sunday. My son was like, yeah, I want to come to that. I want to come to that. My other son was like, yeah, I want to come to that. Their cousins wanted to come. My brother wanted to come. There's a massive group of us and we were all massively into it. And everybody knew the names of the players. You know, my son was sitting there going, Toon, every time Ella Toon got hold of the ball because he's a Manchester United fan. And I think that the recognition that you'll have for these players going forward has increased so much. And I just think that I don't know what the audience figure was for yesterday, but I'm going to go for 15 to 16 million. I hope it was as big as I hoped it would be because it deserved eyeballs on it and their achievements deserve eyeballs on it. And it's great for the women's game going forward. WSL kicks off in September, and hopefully it will increase eyeballs on that as well. They've got a different deal this time around. There's going to be a lot more on YouTube, so it's going to be a lot more accessible to the younger audience too. Serena Bigman probably going to end up with an honorary damehood, I would have thought. And Hannah Hampton deserves a mention as well, Kev, because after Mary Earps was dropped and Hampton was put in, there was a lot of fallout there.
Yeah, it was a situation where she came into it with pressure, and I think she handled it incredibly well. But I mean, she knows how to overcome challenges, because I think what people didn't know before the tournament and maybe read as the tournament went on is that she doesn't have depth perception in the way that we would understand it. Now, for a goalkeeper, that is just mind-blowing, but she's actually found a way to adjust. And, you know, you listen to eye surgeons talk about it, what have you, that they talk about how amazing it is that she's been able to do that. And so you talk about that just in general. You talk about, you know, the bloodied nose that she had and was still able to cope with that. You talk about, I mean, I thought her handling was by and large so clean in the final. And when England were under huge pressure, her leadership and her stoicism really shone. I mean, Lucy Bronze, beyond belief. I mean, I know everybody will talk about the fractured tibia that she's played with all the way through the tournament, but it goes way beyond that. It goes so much earlier than that. And with Earps not being there, Millie Bright not being there, Fran Kirby not being there, that's a lot of experience to lose. And so for her to step up again in the way that she did, hugely, hugely important. And just a quick word on Chloe Kelly as well. You were absolutely right to pinpoint her. Not only has she done all that, she won a Champions League. Yeah. She beat Barcelona in the final to do it. So did Alessia Russo, so did Leah Williamson, so did others. So a phenomenal effort, because make no mistake, that Barcelona team, by and large, is regarded as the best probably in the world at club level. That Spain team, all the way through, played like they were the best team in Europe, maybe the best team in the world, but England found a way.
Yeah, they certainly did. And just a couple of unsung heroes that I think also need a mention. Alessia Russo scored her first goal in the final of the tournament, despite playing a absolutely selfless role at the top of the England formation, holding the ball up brilliantly, keeping hold of possession when it was necessary. She worked tirelessly. She was incredibly difficult to handle. And I think another mention needs to go for Jess Carter, who had a very difficult start to the tournament, was under huge pressure, actually suffered some terrible racial abuse during the course of the tournament, was left out of the starting 11 for the semi-final, but came back in for the final and was absolutely terrific, absolutely brilliant when they needed her the most. I actually think Spain were really disappointing in the final third. Some of the decision-making in the final third let them down, and with better, cleaner passing and utilising the options that they had when they were breaking forward, They probably should have put England to bed well before the final whistle. But resilience, character, sticking in the game, it's all part of it, and England did that. There's more fallout to England's fantastic win across talkSPORT. A dedicated women's football show podcast as well is out now, and a chance for you to react on the YouTube channel as well. There's a big parade that's going to happen over the course of the next couple of days, and that'll all be on talkSPORT as well. Let's switch gears now and get stuck into Liverpool. Can anyone stop the champions next season after what has been an unbelievable transfer window? So during this dark period, we're focusing on some of the big teams and some of their transfer activity and what that means for them going forward. Now, with Liverpool, they've signed Frimpong from Leverkusen, they've signed Wirtz from Bayer Leverkusen and Ekitike from Eintracht Frankfurt. So who better than Kevin Hatchard to discuss the Bundesliga alumni coming to the Premier League? Kev, first of all, you're also a Liverpool fan. Mamardashvili has joined as well. Kirkes has joined too, and there are rumours of others about to join as well. We'll get those from Crook in just a second. But have you ever known a transfer window like this? Could this be transformative?
It's a long way from, and with all due respect to all of them, Poulsen, Konchesky, Jovanovic is quite a long way from that transfer window. There's a reference for the teenagers. Yeah, it's phenomenal. It really is. And what I think does underline FSG, and I'm not a big FSG apologist, but I've always felt that they get more stick than they deserve. And I think this shows that they have spent from a position of strength. They've been kind of hoarding this for quite some time. They've been putting this all in place. And they have targeted these players for quite some time, and they've been able to go out and do it. It's not an easy thing to do, but they've been able to get some quite complex deals over the line. But when they couldn't do that a year ago, they improvised. And Arne Slot did things like making sure Ryan Gravenberch played in the number 6 role. They wanted to be Mendy. That didn't quite happen. And so Gravenberch played there instead. And so they haven't panicked at that stage. But this clearly was something that they were building towards. It was clearly something they wanted to do to give Arne Slot those tools to build upon that league title. Now, the weird thing is, even though I'm mega excited about Wirtz, really excited about some of the other signings that they've made, there is still work to do. Centre-back, they're super light. They really are, I think. Jarell Quansah's gone. Konate's got a year left on his deal. We don't know what's happening with that. Virgil van Dijk, of course, has signed a new deal, and that's hugely important. Joe Gomez has had loads of injury problems. I really wish that wasn't the case because I like him very much. But the truth is, you just don't know if he's going to be able to get through a punishing season without breaking down. So they still have work to do in that regard. But as a statement, and as a message to potential signings, we are a serious club, look at where we're going to, it couldn't have been louder.
Yeah, and Joe Gomez has picked up another injury, which is going to rule him out for a little while longer as well, which is a big problem. So they do need replacements maybe in that area, and they are looking at possibly arriving Alexander Isak. Is that true, Crook? Because that's certainly the rumour at the moment.
Oh, well, the interest is there, no question about that. I think I reported way back in March that he was their dream summer transfer target. I think they wanted some kind of positive indication from Newcastle. They're willing to do business. At the moment, obviously, the message coming out of St James's Park from both Eddie Howe and from the Saudi owners is that Isak is not for sale. That's why we haven't seen a bid go in yet. But they've got the funds. A lot of fans are asking how Liverpool can afford to spend all this money when clubs like Newcastle, Aston Villa to a lesser extent are so worried about PSR. Shows the job that Richard Hughes has done since he came in as sporting director. Once the Luis Diaz transfer goes through, you're talking £190 million worth of sales, including all the add-ons. Darwin Núñez will top that up, but even without Núñez leaving and they're trying to get him out the door, their net spend in this window will be £115 million. So they've got the flexibility, but of course if they spent 130, 150 million even on Alexander Isak, they give him a 5-year contract. Therefore, the transfer fee would be divided up over the contract anyway. So they're ready to go. And I certainly would not rule out Isak arriving at Anfield. And I think if that happens, when you look at the attacking options at their disposal, it's very difficult to see anybody else wrestling the Premier League title from their grasp. I understand what Kev's saying about defenders. That's why they tried for Dean Howson. There's still a little bit of chat doing the rounds about Mark Gahey. And I think they will be looking to bring another centre-back in as well as cover, because the Konate contract situation, I'm told, is still 50-50 at this moment in time, whether they can convince him to sign a new deal.
Well, I mean, if they were to sign Mark Gay and bring in Alexander Isak, it's like signing an all-star team, isn't it, Kevin? But what does that do to the tactical evolution of the side? Because the acquisitions of Frimpong, Kirkesh at fullback, coupled with Wirtz's arrival, suggest a real evolution, doesn't it? The fullback's expected to be maybe more traditional, go back to the sort of direct attacking threat that we saw maybe with the first few seasons of Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, getting high and wide, potentially freeing up central midfield players. How do you see it working?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. And I think this whole window has been about making the toolbox bigger, because I think what you've got is you've got players that could do damage in lots of different ways. So if you're up against a low block, what you might get is somebody like Ekitike or Wirtz doing little 1-2s, little combinations. That might open that up. But what you've also got is where players like Wirtz, like Frimpong, like Ekitike come into their own, is in those transitional moments when the game breaks down and you can hit on the counter-attack. So you've got imagination, you've got technical quality, you've got pace added to the squad, and you have that depth. Because the truth is, I think Arne Slot would have looked at what happened against PSG in the Champions League, and Liverpool only lost on penalties, but he'll have looked at what PSG did after that and thought, that could have been us. That could have been us that went on and maybe won that Champions League, especially because Liverpool were pretty much home and hosed in the Premier League with quite a way to go. So in the end, that comes down to depth. In the end, that comes down to not driving your players into the ground. And I think it did select that same 12, 13, 14 players quite a lot in the opening months and not got away with it, because they've clearly worked really hard on, the rotation and on the sports science element of it, and on how they tweak training, but you can't get away with that all the time. And so I think they've looked to add depth, but also variety in that team. And I think they're pretty much there, apart from that centre-back area.
Well, Kev, just explain to us the significance of Wirtz and Ekitike both signing for Liverpool and how they might combine, because obviously Wirtz has done incredible work playing at Leverkusen. Ekitike's only just really burst onto the scene at Eintracht Frankfurt and hasn't had the most explosive of careers. He's not someone who scores a hell of a lot of goals. And actually, in the first half of last season, he was overshadowed by his strike partner, who ended up at Manchester City.
Yeah, but I think that's really key, actually, the Omar Marmoush thing, because what it shows us is that Ekitike can be a facilitator. And I think I wouldn't compare them directly, because there's nobody quite like Roberto Firmino. But Ekitike is similar in mindset, in that he's about the collective. He's about bringing others into play. He quite likes being a creative centre forward as well as a goal scorer. Now, that's really, really important, because then what you get is you get somebody who can hurt a team in different ways. And what was interesting with Ekitike was he was able to play almost two different halves of the season in the season just gone. He had that role alongside Marmoush where they dovetailed really well and they had an excellent partnership. But then in the second half of the season, once Marmoush had gone to Manchester City, he was able to make that step and able to say, okay, I'll take on that responsibility. I'll be that number 9 who can lead the line. Now, his game suffered a tiny bit for a while because I think he took too much on. But once he adjusted to it, he then actually showed the kind of facilitator that he can be. And if you look at things like expected assists and that kind of data, that's the kind of thing that I think Liverpool have looked at. That's the kind of player I think they've been attracted to. And in terms of Wirtz, he's very much somebody, again, he could play the false 9 role. He could play the 10 role. He could play slightly wider. He could do lots of different things. And when you've got imaginative players like Ekitike, like Wirtz, it shows those combinations. Now, Crookie, I know, you're pretty plugged into what Liverpool have been trying to do in terms of their squad building. And it seems to me that combination piece, that idea of not just being a pure goal scorer with Ekitike, but being a creative player, seems like that was what Richard Hughes had in mind going forward.
Yeah, and I think Arne Slot sees him as someone who can play as a number 9. He can play as part of a partnership. He can play in one of those wide positions. So it gives them versatility. at the top end of the pitch. I think it's fascinating to see how this squad is evolving, because I think in an ideal world, they may have kept Luis Diaz, but they looked at his age. I think he turns 29 on his next birthday. They would have looked at what players of a similar profile have gone for in terms of transfer fees. And I think they felt this was too good a deal to turn down, really, bearing in mind that they've made a couple of attempts to get him to sign a new long-term contract, and he wasn't keen to do that. And they will use the money to reinvest, and potentially in Alexander Isak. And they've got cover now, haven't they? I mean, the Conor Bradley situation, I think, fascinates me, because Jeremy Frimpong isn't really a right back. He's a right wing back, and Arne Slot doesn't tend to play with a back three. So I would expect Conor Bradley to start the season in that position and try and make that Trent Alexander-Arnold spot his own. But again, it gives good options. And I think you should be really excited about Milos Kerkez. Andrew Robertson has been a tremendous servant for Liverpool. But again, they've looked at his age and they've decided they need a younger model. And I think in Kerkez, they've got a player who is still really at the fledgling stage of his career, but has already made his mark in the Premier League. So I think he's an exciting addition as well.
I think that Luis Diaz thing is going to be really interesting, actually, because it could be one of those transfers where everybody gets what they want. Bayern have been looking all season, or all summer rather, for a marquee signing. They wanted Florian Wirtz. It was clear that that wasn't going to happen after a while once he'd made the decision to go to Liverpool, or once it was clear that Liverpool not only had the ambition to sign, but had the finance to sign. So Bayern were really wounded by that. That was a deal they wanted to do, and suddenly they realised they weren't going to be able to do it. They've been linked with all manner of left-sided players. Nico Williams, Bradley Barcola, Rafael Leao. They've looked at all different names. Diaz is the one they really settled on. They were clearly given the indication from his people that that was something that the player would be keen on. And so now it looks as though that's going to happen. Liverpool get their money, which they can reinvest or balance the books with what they've done. He will get the pay rise that he wants and feels he deserves, and he gets to play for a club that, like Liverpool, will be looking to challenge for titles in the forthcoming season. And I think it just works out for Bayern as well, because it will take a bit of heat off Max Eberl, who's the senior sporting director, because a lot of people in German media have been saying, well, what's going on here? Because you didn't get Wirtz. You've been round the houses with the left wingers and haven't been able to make anything happen. Where's the backup for Harry Kane that you've been talking about? Because they still haven't done a deal for Nick Woltemade at Stuttgart. So I think it's going to be one of those deals where everybody gets something out of it and it's positive all round.
Two things that we've got to address. I mean, first of all, Mo Salah, talisman last year, of course, new deal secured, but he is a year older, didn't finish the season as strongly as he'd been playing in the early part of the season, the mid part of the season. Can he reach those levels again? What's the sort of feeling amongst the Liverpool fans, Kev?
Yeah, I think he can. I think the thing that's interesting about Salah, obviously he did dip towards the end of the season. It was a curious part of the season anyway, because Liverpool pretty much knew they'd won the league. The Champions League had gone west. So it was kind of a weird period. But he's talked about this himself. Teams have cottoned on to what Liverpool were doing in the sense that everything was going through Salah. So everything was very much at his service, not by his request necessarily, but that's just the way Liverpool decided to do it because he is their most effective forward player. And so Salah was being double teamed. They were trying to cut the supply lines. Teams had started to work it out. And I think, again, that goes back to the Wirtz thing, the Ekitike thing. They're trying to add players who could create space for Salah, who can combine with Salah, but also create problems in their own way. I think Gakpo is going to be a big part of that coming in off the left. I think they feel he can take another step this season. So I think it's perhaps going to be a bit more collegiate. It's not going to be as Salah focused as it was. And I think that'll be to Salah's benefit in the end and Liverpool's.
Of course, what we must discuss is the heartbreaking tragedy of Diogo Jota and the impact that that's going to have on the team. Speaking to members of the hierarchy at Liverpool over the summer, the sense of devastation and heartbreak is tangible. It's so obvious that it will have in some way an impact. And I think that whatever happens over the course of the season, we have to remember that in a sensitive way, that is always going to be present. That's always going to be at the forefront of the players' mind, the staff's mind, the fans' mind over the course of the campaign. And it will be amazing if they can manage to continue to play in the same way or to evolve in the way that they wanted to, despite the tragedy that has befallen them. But I think we all have to understand that there may be at different points over the season where individual players get hit by that sense of loss, and the grieving process may not have even started for some of them yet, because it does sometimes take a very long time for that kind of event to have its full impact.
Absolutely. And like you, I've been speaking to people close to Liverpool, and it's hit everybody very hard. What a humble and popular guy Jota was in the dressing room has come across in all of those conversations. And you never know how you're going to react to such a tragedy. I do think in some ways they'll use it to galvanise the dressing room, and they'll want to retain the title for Jota. Obviously, there are going to be tributes paid throughout the course of the season. But as well as the human loss, it's a loss to Liverpool having such a selfless player at their disposal, because he could do a variety of roles. He was happy to come off the bench. He was a menace when he started games. As much as they're strengthening in attack, there will be times across the season when they miss that Jota type of player as well. And you wonder, would they have signed both Ekitike and still be trying to sign Isak had this terrible tragedy not have befallen them?
I think Sam makes a really good point about it going deep into the season, because grief hits people in completely different ways, completely different timelines. It might be a moment where a player remembers him or something triggers something, and, you know, players will be up and down. I think, and the impression we're given is that they're in very good hands with Arne Slot, because he has handled this incredibly well. I think he's spoken incredibly well privately and publicly. And I think he will be very, very aware of how this is going to affect his players and the club and fans, not just for the next few months, but beyond that, because this has been such a shocking tragedy. And he was so beloved, not just of the fans, but also his teammates and everybody associated with the club. I think the club have handled it with great care and with great sensitivity. It's not an easy thing to do. And I think they have done it really, really well. And they seem to be working very closely with the wider family as well. And I think that is incredibly important.
Well, I think we should probably leave our analysis of Liverpool there and come back to the runners and the riders for the title race over the course of the next few weeks. We'll continue to profile individual clubs, their signings, their tactical evolution going into the first few weeks of the season. But next, we're going to turn our attention to the transfer window and ask whether or not Newcastle will actually make another signing during this period. Well, there's only one man to turn to when it comes to transfers, transfer rumours, contracts being signed. It is the inflatable dragon-riding, beer-swilling, Portuguese-living Alex Crook, who is still away, but still, as he constantly tells us, doing business on his sun lounger. Crookmeister, Newcastle very much, I think, in limbo. Isak obviously clearly wants to move away now. He's made it pretty clear to everybody that he wants a new challenge. He is under contract until 2028, so there is no absolute imperative that Newcastle have to sell him. But when a player tells you that they want to do something new, your job really then is to just maybe juice out as much price as you can get, as much revenue from that potential deal as possible. And then they've got to turn their attention to somebody else. And we're hearing over the last couple of days that possibly could be Benjamin Šeško.
Yeah, Šeško is someone that Eddie Howe has had on his radar for some time, so I'm not surprised that they're now ramping up interest in him. There's a little bit of competition from Manchester United, although I think that would depend on player sales, getting the likes of Garnacho and Sancho and Anthony out of the door at Carrington, because obviously they've already spent big money on Mbeumo and Cunha. But I get the impression that Šeško might be willing to wait and see if that move to Old Trafford does evolve. Johan Wissa is looking like an increasingly difficult deal to do now. Brentford have told Newcastle, we broke this over the weekend, that he isn't for sale. Wisser has reacted angrily to that. He feels that he is due a move, that indeed he's been promised a move away, and that Brentford have now reneged on that, and he's talking about not going back for training, so that one could get very bitter very quickly. But if they do sell Isak, and it's not guaranteed that this deal happens, but if they do, I think there's an argument they need two forwards, not just one, because they've already let Callum Wilson go, weren't able to agree terms on a new deal for him. I saw Willisula started up front against Arsenal yesterday. It's asking an awful lot of him with no Premier League experience to be the main frontline striker. So I think this is a bit of a crisis for Newcastle. 3 weeks out from the start of the season, their best player wants to leave, and they haven't been able to really bolster their forward line. Yes, I think Elanga will turn out to be a decent signing, but it's been a frustrating summer for Eddie Howe. And then you factor in Sven Botman limping off again. Do they need another centre-back as well? There's a lot of work to be done on that squad.
Do you know what? It's really fascinating, isn't it, Kevin? Because I have been railing against PSR for so long, because I believe that what happens is you get into a position like Newcastle have got. You go hurtling up the league, you get into the Champions League, you start to become one of those more established clubs chasing European football and causing the established order a few issues. And then all of a sudden, that glass ceiling is hit and you can no longer spend the money that you need to spend in order to go through it. But then I start to think, well, was it ever thus that Newcastle were always a club that got up to that level and then could never quite go through that glass ceiling to become regular title challengers on a season-to-season basis? Because ultimately, their players always seem to be using Newcastle as a stepping stone to elsewhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, I go back in the day, the Andy Cole situation, okay, he'll tell you a different story about that, but it certainly felt like that at the time. You know, unless you're Alan Shearer and you are the best striker that's ever played in Premier League football, but happen to have an emotional connection to Newcastle, most players go there and then go somewhere else. And it feels like Isak has used them in that way. So I can't work out whether it's PSR that's going to hold them back and stop them from getting any further, which is really annoying when you've done such a good job as Eddie Howe has done, or whether it's just the natural order of English football that stops you from breaking into that very, very top echelon.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is I can understand why Newcastle and Villa fans get very frustrated with PSR, and it's a difficult thing because it's there to stop clubs superheating the market at some stage, but it's then difficult to overturn that historical piece where you are trying to chase an established club like Liverpool, who have that cachet, and of course they're now back to spending big themselves. So it's difficult to kind of bridge that gap. You find it in other countries as well, because you'll always get, say, Borussia Dortmund might develop some great players, but ultimately they know they're either going to go to the Premier League or they're going to go to Bayern or Real Madrid. You know, they were never going to keep Haaland long term. They were never going to keep Jude Bellingham long term. And they've been in Champions League finals. They've won.
And
things.
I totally get that,
club.
Kev. But the problem here is that Newcastle have got ambition. So their owners have got the ambition for a long-term sustainable project, which gets them into the upper echelons of English football and European football. They want to get to that level. Their fans want to get to that level. They don't accept that actually they're always going to lose their players elsewhere. They don't accept that they're never going to be able to get into the top 2 or 3 season in, season out. They want to achieve that and they're happy to invest to do it, but they've been prevented from doing so. Something is stopping them. This team should be kicking on after winning a trophy for the first time and doing something special next season. But it feels like that the gods are against them.
Well, the question you have to ask, I guess, ultimately, is if it was about unlimited funds, would Isak stay? Well, the impression doesn't seem to be that it's about money necessarily. Is it actually about the fact that if he wanted to go to Liverpool, for example, they're putting together something quite exciting. They're making all these signings. They've just won the Premier League title. But
Newcastle want to do that.
They
Newcastle
do, but
want
they're
to
not
do
there
that
yet. So I get it. I would like to see PSR rewritten. I'd like to see the ethos of it maintained, that you can't have one or two super clubs who have state backing, for example, or unlimited funds superheat the market and make it impossible for the rest. But I totally get that there are ambitious owners that want to get up there. I would rewrite it totally, but I'm not going to bore you with my system because we've been there before. But what actually might come of this, funnily enough, let's say they were to sign Šeško. And I know there's loads of ifs, buts, and maybes. I've been asked about Šeško a lot, but actually not to do with Newcastle because that's relatively fresh, to do with Arsenal. And the reason was, should Arsenal go for Šeško or Gyökeres? And obviously they've gone for Gyökeres, right? That's because I believe Arsenal are in win-now mode. They wanted a guy who they felt was a proven guy with a track record who was going to score, X amount of goals and was ready to go now. Šeško might not be that guy. But I think what he is a guy with a higher ceiling than Gyökeres. I think he has physical gifts that can allow him to become an elite striker. He's tall, he's quick, he's skillful, he's got everything you would need. Is he a bit ragged? Yeah, absolutely. Does he shoot sometimes when he should pass? Yes. All of that stuff can be smoothed. All that stuff can change. If they were to actually get him, it would be short-term pain, because Newcastle fans would miss Isak. In the long term, that could prove to be a really good signing.
One player they won't be getting Newcastle United is James Trafford. He's heading back to Manchester City. Now, you don't spend 30 plus million quid on a goalkeeper unless he's going to be playing regular football, Crook, do you?
Well, that was my reading of it. Obviously, Stefan Ortega now will be allowed to go, and there's a little bit of interest from English clubs in him, the likes of Trafford's old club, Burnley and Leicester, I'm told, have registered their interest. But speaking of somebody close to the situation yesterday, they were under the impression that, at least for the start of the season, Trafford would be number 2 to Ederson. He's there to put pressure on the Brazilian, who didn't have the best of seasons in your mind. I know, Sam, and I agree with you last year. But yeah, certainly they've signed Trafford with a view to him being ready to be a Premier League number 1. As I say, be that weeks or months into the season, we'll find out. Newcastle, for their part, have now diverted attention to Aaron Ramsdale down at Southampton, somebody that Eddie Howe knows very well from his time at Bournemouth. And I'm told Ramsdale, having already turned down Sunderland this summer, would be keen to join their North East rivals. So we're keeping close tabs on that. And there could be a bit of a domino effect because obviously they don't want 2 number 1s, Newcastle. I think Ramsdale would want assurances that he would be number 1 in order to get on the plane for England next summer. And Manchester United, I'm told, have an interest in Nick Pope potentially. So that's one perhaps that we'll keep an eye on as well.
It's interesting. Speaking of clubs that get deals done, Spurs have missed out on Morgan Gibbs-White, but Nottingham Forest have managed to get him to sign an extension to his contract. I mean, this is pretty special for them, isn't it, Crook?
It is, and actually I was at the stadium in Faro over here in Portugal on Saturday night, and Gibbs-White was there with his Forest teammates for the friendly against Fulham. And even in the warm-up, I could just see that he had a spring in his step because we didn't know at that stage that he was going to sign a new contract, or in fact had signed a new contract, and you wondered, would he be sulking after seeing the move to Tottenham block? But far from it. They were quite poor, Forest, in the first half in particular, but he came on at half-time and injected a real urgency and a real dynamism into their play. And I think it actually makes sense for Gibbs-White because we know that he's not Thomas Tuchel's favourite player. He left him out of his first squad, then he called him up, then he left him out of the squad for the game itself. And eventually it was that game at the City Ground when he came on against Senegal and did well there. He wants a World Cup place, and he might just feel, Gibbs-White, actually staying at Forest, becoming the highest paid player in their history, as I understand he has, that might be better in terms of convincing Tuchel than going to Tottenham, competing maybe with James Maddison and perhaps even not being a guaranteed starter. He's the main man at Forest. They're going to build their team around him. Yeah,
exactly. Another, I wouldn't say failing for Daniel Levy and Spurs, but it's not a great look, is it, to have activated what they believe was a release clause and then not get that one over the line, Kev?
Yeah, it was quite a complex issue, wasn't it, really? And, a lot of the time when that happens, what you tend to get is a bit of to and froing, but what ultimately happens really is the player has his head turned and the club that wants to buy him ends up paying a bit more maybe to smooth it all over. But Marinakis is the X factor here. And I thought that video, which must have had about 17 references to Mr. Marinakis, when they announced the new contract, it was all a bit strange. But the thing is, you know from years at Olympiacos, Marinakis isn't like a lot of owners.
No.
He has this force of personality. He has this bloody mindedness, and Forest were not going to accept that they were going to lose one of their best players just because of this release clause. So they dug their heels in. And even though it was really quite extraordinary PR, that video, it's huge for Forest because it is a little signal that, well, we are going to fight to keep our best players. We are serious. We are a club that is actually trying to build on what we've done last season rather than let the team be picked apart. So a very unusual situation. I don't think necessarily, because I think it shows what Tottenham are trying to do. The fact they couldn't quite do it is more down to Marinakis than anything else, I think.
Yeah, fair. Okay, across North London, Gyökeres being confirmed as a possibility. Crook, we'll do a quick couple of ones here. As a possibility?
Yeah, I think it's still dependent on Leandro Trossard in particular, or Gabriel Martinelli being sold, but Arsenal's still keen. I think personal terms are already pretty much in place. They'd like to sign him, I think, for slightly under his £68 million release clause. But yeah, I certainly wouldn't rule that one out between now and September the 1st.
It's amazing that there's a wide player or an attacking midfield player that Chelsea haven't signed. They are getting rid of João Felix, though, for 44 million quid, which is an amazing amount of money for someone who just doesn't play much football. He has had some bizarre career, hasn't he, really? Xavi Simons is lined up to replace him. Kev, tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, exciting. The technical quality's there, the goals are there, the assists are there. He's been very effective for Leipzig, although he was part of a very poor Leipzig team that failed to qualify for Europe for the first time in their history. My concerns about him are all kind of intangibles, really, because he does the things you'd expect an attacking midfielder to do. He can beat players, he can score goals, he can assist, but he just always looks like he's not quite happy. And I think that piece needs to change. I think, he's done amazing things for a player of his age, no doubt about it. But I think Leipzig thought there was going to be a bigger auction for him than there has been. And I think there are, and I'm guessing here, but I think there are clubs who are looking at him and just not quite 100% convinced by him. Now, that might all change. That might be a maturing thing. That might be just he's still young. Loads of that stuff might change. But I just wonder if clubs have looked at him and kind of thought twice. But if Chelsea do get him and get him right and get him in position to do all these things, he can be an exceptional player.
Scored a great goal against England in the European Championship semi-final, didn't he? And just to clarify, it is Simon?
So, funnily enough, you might not need to bother with any
here.
of that, because at the Bundesliga, we got told just say Xavi.
Just say Xavi. Oh, yeah, obviously, because he wants to be Xavi like Xavi Hernandez. Yeah, that's what he wants. Fair enough. Okay, we'll just do that.
Could be, we were told there was a reason he didn't want the Simons.
Okay,
he just wanted Xavi, and so that's what we did.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. All right. We'll go back to the age-old adage of Didier Zokora, who wanted to have the word and did have an African Cup of Nations maestro on the back of his shirt.
Yes.
It's a true story, folks. It's a true story.
What's the latest with Granit Xhaka, Crook? Because it looks as if he's going to Sunderland. Is that done?
Yeah, deal's agreed. £13 million up front, plus 4 in add-ons. When you look at some of the fees that have been paid this summer, that looks like good business to me. He's 32, I think, and obviously has had a really good couple of years at Leverkusen. Actually ended his Arsenal career having got the fans back on side. So I think that's a really good buy for Sunderland.
Kev, just tell us what he's been like at Bayer Leverkusen, and also how Sunderland managed to get this deal done, because this is a guy, as I understand it, with quite some length still left on his contract.
Yeah, it's come as a bit of a surprise to Leverkusen. They didn't want to let him go. They've stuck to the figure that they wanted, and it seems that's what Sunderland are going to pay. So this was absolutely a club that didn't want to let him go. So much so that Erik ten Hag, their new coach, actually came out publicly and said, we do not want him to leave, but he's clearly been determined to return to the Premier League. Maybe there's an element that he feels unfinished business. I think Sunderland are doing some quite exciting things. I think Régis Lebris has done a wonderful job, actually, as coach. And so they feel like a club that's on the up. And I think Sunderland fans are going to absolutely love him because we know about his leadership. That always gets talked about, right? Because, he's quite a forceful character, well over 100 caps for Switzerland, proper leader. I think what actually was even more impressive, especially in Leverkusen's unbeaten league and cup double winning season, was the technical ability, the ability to move out of pressing, the ability to get a team moving. If you looked at all of his data, it's crazy how often he was able to keep a move alive or keep a team going. And he really has matured and improved. I think it's a cracking signing. I think it could prove to be a real coup for Sunderland going forward.
Right, okay, that's it from us this week. Crook, I don't know if you've seen that I have a brand new cowboy hat. I've got a cowboy hat, cowboy boots. I'm going to the Grand Ole Opry this week. I am Nashvilling it up, absolutely. You would love it here. This is up your Strasse, this place.
Well, bring me a cowboy hat back. I've got my own cowboy jingle. As you know, I know that you and Jim White don't particularly like it, but I can play the part.
Yeah, I reckon you could. I'm not necessarily sure that I'd fancy you on the bucking bronco, which we were on last night. However, I'm willing to pay good money to see it, I must admit.
Never mind a bucking bronco. Over here, I tried one of those inflatable assault courses in the sea. Let's just say they're not designed for slightly portly 6'4" blokes who don't have a lot of upper body strength. Every time I fell off,
Please
I
tell
needed
me
the
this
lifeguard to lift me on back on the assault course.
Is this
it
like
was
Wipeout?
not an easy job for him.
Celebrity Wipeout.
It was. I
we should
hurt my
definitely get
arm.
you
I
to do
stubbed
that.
my toe. I was knackered. I said to the kids, "Never again."
I'd pay quite a lot of money to see that, I think. I need to see this footage, I think.
I like the fact that he said, I said to the kids, never again. The kids said to him, never again.
Yes, exactly. Please stop embarrassing us.
Yeah. No, he's not our dad. All right. Jen, see you later on. Next week, we'll be turning our attention to somebody else who will be chasing the Premier League title next year. Chelsea, winners in New York just a few weeks ago. We'll focus on them next weekend. Join us for that on Premier League All Access from talkSPORT.